Good day, everyone. My name is Peter Sondergaard, and I am the CEO of the Sondergaard Group. Plus, also, I am the chairman of the board for 2021, who today is hosting this webinar. A webinar that we will cover in detail with regards to artificial intelligence, but specifically how to scale artificial intelligence. So, let's kick off. It's very clear that about every 20 years, a technology matures to the level in which it then becomes mainstream and also, in many ways, therefore impacts our society, your organization, and in fact, us as individuals. And artificial intelligence is exactly that. It is clear that we have, for a number of years, been experimenting proofs of concept with artificial intelligence. With the emergence of Gen AI, it's now clear that this has exploded into a broad-based technology that every organization will have to relate to. What we will talk about is the business dimension of scaling artificial intelligence. So please be aware, we're not going to dive into scaling the technology per se, but we'll obviously talk about this from a perspective of what we do as businesses in terms of scaling the usage of artificial intelligence. Before I dive into the three topics that I will cover today, I think it's important to start off to set the scene. And these three quotes, I believe, actually does that pretty well. Quote from Mark Andreessen from 2011, "Software is eating the world." The quote in the middle, which is, "The data is the oil of the 21st century, but analytics and artificial intelligence is becoming the combustion engine." Today, artificial intelligence presents the true ability to now start to utilize the massive amounts of data that we've collected. And then, of course, the last quote, which is from 1970, actually, which is that man is merely the intermediate step between monkey and computer. Now, whether or not that's true is up to you to decide, but I think these three things set the stage for the challenges that we face as we now start to move from having tested artificial intelligence into actually looking at how is it going to evolve from a scale perspective inside your organization. And so we're going to cover three topics today. First, I'll do sort of a general introduction of how is AI going to evolve over the next couple of years. Now, that's impossible to do in 2 or 3 slides, but it gives you a set of guiding posts, perhaps, in terms of where this is moving. And obviously, the fact that we have to start to plan on it changing the fundamentals of business models. And that the impact will be substantial, certainly 5 years out. Once we've done that, we'll talk about the adoption of artificial intelligence within organizations. How and why are we going to adopt this? First, obviously, as a building block of our technology architecture, but frankly also as an element of both processes, products, and the customer experience that we have. So substantially broader than necessarily what we have seen with many technologies over the years. And then we'll talk about the tactics. Obviously, there will be many, but a few pointers as to what you should look at from a perspective of those tactics. Let's jump into the first of these topics. And first, what better than to get a sense of the size of the market? And there's actually, there's 2 challenges in this slide, and probably, therefore, also 2 statements that are untrue. First is, AI is not a market. It is a capability that impacts a large number of different technology markets, and so it's much more profound than many niche or specific focus technologies, is that it will impact all aspects of what we do. The second is that if you look at projections from different research organizations around the globe as to the growth rate of artificial intelligence, most of them will say that they don't really know, and that the numbers are in fact somewhat conservative. Now, you can segment the market into looking at the tool and infrastructure aspects where artificial intelligence truly has an impact. You can look at it from a perspective of the impact in the application markets. But it's also true that artificial intelligence is impacting application development environments and therefore the tools for that, and of course also the vertical applications, of which there are many, of which some actually are into products, into the digital twin of technology as it evolves into all products that human beings manufacture. So it's not a market. The growth projections are not accurate. But it is certain that the growth rate will be substantial, and the reaction to that, therefore, becomes that we will have to acknowledge that as buyers of information technology, as buyers of technology for a digital transformation, artificial intelligence will impact every technology provider that you currently use and every technology provider that you plan to use. So part of what we need to understand here is that we're going to have to now look at a serious review of the major providers that are strategic to our platforms, because they are being challenged. And we can just look at the battle between Microsoft and its collaboration with ChatGPT or OpenAI, and then the reaction from Google. That reaction is proliferating and has been over the last 6 months across every technology provider. And therefore, understand that a growing market or growing environment like this is something that will impact the providers that you have. Secondly, over the next 3 to 5 years, we will start to see AI actually challenge some of the economic fundamentals, both of your business model, but also of society. And there are at least 5. There are likely many more, but at least 5 that we need to react to and understand are the drivers of some of the changes that you will see in your organization. First is that we will probably see decreasing margins as a result of artificial intelligence. Now, that's actually a bold statement, but if you believe in the statement of Mark Andreessen, which is everything is becoming software, development is clearly impacted by that. And if artificial intelligence can truly impact the speed at which we could develop applications, and thus therefore the productivity of application developers, it is plausible to say that application development becomes a lot cheaper. And for many tech service provider organizations, you have to ask the question, will this mean a race to the bottom in terms of competition because of decreasing margins? Now, I could flip this and argue the other way, but I think you have to ask yourself the question, is that an economic reality that we need to address? The second one is the one that has been talked about a lot over the last many years, which is that it increases productivity. It's very clear now for everybody, from the board to the executive management team to managers across the organization and employees, is that there is going to be an impact on productivity. Unfortunately, the debate is very much centered around jobs and the impact on jobs. And I believe that that's the wrong place to focus on in terms of productivity. What we should understand is that jobs are a combination of capabilities or skills that an individual has. So it is a question of looking at a decomposition of jobs into competencies, and then understand which competencies AI will actually eliminate or replace. Because for most jobs, there are still things that human beings do that human beings will need to do at least over the next 5 years. But the question is, how are you going to react to the ability to increase productivity? If you don't do it, your competitor, therefore, obviously will look at whether or not that's a way in which they compete against you. Now, artificial intelligence is not only Gen AI, and we know that, is that there's many other aspects of this. some of which now is starting to reach scale that impacts the capital utilization of what we have. So it's clear that it will have an impact in terms of lower replacement rates, higher product service revenues, therefore. So there is an impact also in every capital asset that is out there. And fourth is, it's come to the forefront, if it hadn't already, is that data is clearly strategic, but that the existence of the right data and the ability to adapt data is something that we will have to incorporate into our business planning, into the fact that managers need to be aware of this going forward, not just within IT, but more broadly among everybody in the organization. And then fifth is artificial intelligence risk. Risk has a new dimension now. So corporate risk and governance teams are going to have to now incorporate what are the AI risks that are posed to the organization going forward. So you can see risk, the cost of capital, the increase in productivity, the potential for decreasing margins are all things that will fundamentally impact your business model going forward. Now, I am a huge fan of my former employer's different ways of illustrating the market, and I believe that it is now clear to all of us that different aspects of artificial intelligence actually has different phases of maturity. So what we need to better do now is planning in terms of when do we expect the elements of artificial intelligence that impact your organization to mature. Many of them will mature over the next 2 to 5 years. And therefore, in your planning, it becomes important to start to react now in order to be ready for a massively different economic competitive environment. There are also contradictions in the markets at this stage. There is obviously contradiction between the evolution of things like Gen AI and then responsible AI. Both can coexist, both will coexist, but both are major themes that at times seem opposing to each other or negatively or positively impacting each other. It is clear, though, that the age-old observation, which is that we as human beings tend to overestimate the short-term impact and underestimate the long-term impact, is that will be true for artificial intelligence. It is critical that we now start to understand what are not just the first-order impacts, such as productivity, such as, for example, how we address different aspects of capital asset utilization, but what does that mean in the second order or the third order impact within an organization? So, as you can see, short in terms of what is happening, and I think the major part here is therefore to really be clear that this is a mission-critical priority that needs to be treated at board level, that needs to be treated at CEO level or head of organization. It is a differentiator and it is a threat. I would also start to think about how I review my strategy up against that of my nearest competitors, whether I'm in the technology industry or, for that matter of fact, any business or public sector organization out there. And then I would start to say, the only way I succeed at scaling the usage of artificial intelligence is if I have the competencies inside my organization among all employees in the organization. So you need to start to consider, does that mean we need to put this in as an objective for the employees in terms of their development plans over the course of the next couple of years? And is it perhaps an idea to nominate 2024, since this year is almost past, as the year of AI for your organization? Worth pondering, but you've got to look at how you change things now because things have changed around you. Now let's look at adoption. So how do we think adoption will evolve? As I said, AI is a building block in the technology architecture. It's a capability that exists in all products. So we need to therefore assume that this will impact both the scaling of processes, products, interaction with customers and suppliers, and therefore the need to understand broad impact is perhaps more important now than it ever has been with different waves of technology. The first thing is, and I'm sorry if the reformatting here on the screen doesn't work entirely well, but the first thing is to appreciate that the evolution of and adoption of artificial intelligence will vary across vertical industry and will also vary across different functional departments in the organization. And the message in this, therefore, is that if that is true, then every functional leader in the organization needs to be capable of understanding what the abilities of artificial intelligence are in terms of impacting their role and responsibility and the area that they are working in. More importantly, we need to understand that the adoption cycles in, say, B2C or in organizations that are service-oriented compared to, for example, manufacturing will vary. And so you will still need to seek use case situations that may be agnostic to vertical industry, but you need to understand that there will be, for artificial intelligence, different things that will govern what and when you do scale aspects of artificial intelligence. Those things could, for example, be the regulatory environment. It's clear that we will have varying regulatory environments for artificial intelligence. Say, for example, how it impacts the pharmaceutical industry and development of new drugs, or, for example, how it impacts the banking industry and therefore the impact on banking regulators. More so, of course, in the function, here illustrated in the red box by, for example, marketing, you also will see different adoption across industries. And perhaps it's maybe interesting to go into one department and see how, in fact, scaling happens across many of the areas of responsibility within that organization. And I have here picked the HR organization. So how does this impact the roles and responsibilities within the HR organization? And ultimately, why does the head of HR need to be concerned about artificial intelligence? Well, first, it impacts every aspect of the HR organization. The 5 boxes here are merely example representations of the responsibilities of HR organizations. But you could see that in payroll and compensation, it's pretty certain that it impacts the way in which we do compensation planning, because that can be done better if you take out the human bias that exists in compensation planning and instead have true models that do this. It's also certain that artificial intelligence will support the development of performance evaluations and continuous performance management-based situations. I will venture the statement that at the end of this year, a lot of managers will use ChatGPT to write the performance evaluations for the employees that work for them. I'm sure the right ones will read it before they actually give it to the employee, but it's plausible that that happens. And this is one area that is an area of responsibility for HR. You can go through recruiting. Obviously there, we are getting into environments where there are true AI-assisted recruiter-based platforms, onboarding platforms that are AI-assisted and integrated with the recruiter platforms. In learning and development, we will, as we see in the education industry or in the education sectors, see a substantial and massive shift in how we will learn and how we will develop. And that is something that everyone in an organization, but certainly coordinated by the head of HR, need to start to think about now. Things like critical thinking things like emotional engagement are competencies that are very valuable for organizations, because other competencies can be trained by artificial intelligence, can be learnt by artificial intelligence, and can, in some instances, also be executed by artificial intelligence. And then, of course, at the last box, what we see is that it also impacts things like the size and scale and growth of the analytics component of HR. And then last but not least, truly important, is that the whole discussion around diversity and inclusion now gets an added dimension, which is what is the impact of the models that we deploy? What is the impact of the data that we use in terms of the recommendations, the output that we are going to see from these models? So an AI ethics or AI charter is something that becomes important for the head of HR to start to consider for the organization, which should be part of every handbook. Although they're not physical anymore, but anything that the HR organization posts on the web in terms of how you deal with this. So as you can see, this is one department within a set of different functions, all of which will be impacted by this as we go forward. The other thing is, of course, that it impacts our technology or architecture. And I started off saying that it would, and it's very clear that whatever way you choose to actually illustrate your technology architecture, there is an impact. And so we will, as the ones that work within the IT organization, need to seriously evaluate where are we taking our architecture over the next 5 years. Because this will impact application development. It increases productivity of developers. The emergence of artificial intelligence-driven low-code, no-code tools will increase the number of people involved in development. And there is the plausible scenario that the cost base for developing externally may also go down, or the profit levels of the service providers will go up once it starts to impact these segments. In applications, we will start to see increased competition as a result of this very significant shift in capability that happens, which will mean increased activity of new startups. It will also mean that every large technology provider are going to have to figure out how does this fit into our strategy, our product roadmap, and that therefore requires the IT organization to sit back and evaluate what are we doing and what input are we getting from technology providers about the changes that are happening. Infrastructure, well, within infrastructure, we will have a continued set of capabilities that will evolve within cybersecurity as a result of artificial intelligence, as well as, of course, it completes, or in fact, it certainly accelerates the automation of the infrastructure environments that we have in place. And then last, but certainly not least, is that in data and analytics, we will face this challenge of one, starting to see model ops as a key critical capability, a capability that will need to not just underpin the models that are run centrally from the IT organization, but the models that will proliferate across the organization as we see and will rapidly see the proliferation of the usage of artificial intelligence in its broad definition across every function, across every role, across every industry, and across every geography. And then it's plausible, therefore, that data analytics and AI become the fastest growing, if it hasn't already, part of the IT organization simply because of the importance of this as we move forward. So, as you can see, impact across the architecture that requires us to react at this stage, not necessarily react as a a knee-jerk reaction, but certainly a reaction that requires consideration of, are there any changes that we need to make in terms of technology providers, in terms of architecture, in terms of focus, in terms of budget, and in terms of people that we may have in the IT organization. Now, when we then start to scale AI, the natural observation is that this is not a binary thing. It's not I don't have it and then suddenly I have it everywhere. So we will all go through a natural evolution of maturity, and it will therefore be valuable for the executive management team to establish some kind of maturity model that can have the organization understand where they are today, adopt a common language about what is the next generation, the next steps, as well as also adopt a realistic plan as to how long time it takes to move through these different generations. Now, I've outlined here, 5-step model from a little company called Digitopia that basically looks at the maturity levels from novice through developing, all the way to progressive, proficient, and then advanced. And as you can see in the descriptions, and you can obviously get these afterwards, as you will see in the descriptions, they illustrate a different level of maturity in the organization. And when I say maturity in the organization, I'm not thinking about the maturity of the data science organization or the maturity around the usage of artificial intelligence in the IT organization. I mean the entire organization. And in order for us to scale, we need the maturity across every functional part of the organization in terms of being able to deploy this correctly. Now, how would you look at breaking that maturity down? And these 6 areas give you at least a high-level view of what we need to look at when we talk about maturity within the artificial intelligence adoption and scalability. There are capabilities. So how mature are your leadership capabilities around artificial intelligence? How do they map into the other set of competencies that you have and need and require in the leadership team? How do you look at skills and competencies and the evolution of that across the broad organization? What impact does it have on your culture? I mean, if you're adopting technology that substantially changes the productivity of the organization, you're changing the culture. And that requires, as we all know, considerable thought. First, for the ones that are implementing, because you want to be successful, but secondly, also, you don't want to break the glass or break other parts of the organization as you do this. The other aspects, we're not going to be able to go through each of them, but you can see there's an impact on governance, there's an impact on infrastructure, there's an impact on the customer. What do you tell the customer in terms of what you're doing with artificial intelligence? Because keep in mind, some of this may have negative ramifications. Is it better to tell them that you are testing out new technologies or not say anything and then hope nothing breaks? In essence, since it impacts the experience, it does impact the applications that touches the customer, and it will impact your product and service offerings. We would need to think and consider what is the impact, what is our maturity to address that. And in all these 6 areas, you could yourself develop a scoring model on a scale from 1 to 5 and just basically look at where do you stand today in terms of that level of maturity. Now, there's a lot of data emerging right now as we speak with regards to where is the world with regards to this. This data is from one of the large consultancy organizations, and it shows that essentially you have a very high level of maturity in 48%, in 15% of organizations, 48% being mature. And the expectation going forward is that that actually changes substantially some organizations believing that they actually will be market leading in terms of what they're doing. The main thing is that you will find that C-suite leaders are, when they know about this, actually relatively positive. And that's illustrated mostly by the fact that the latest earnings announcement that has happened out of Wall Street and also the European exchanges all illustrate through the notes or comments from the CEOs that artificial intelligence is part of what they are considering. Now, it's sure that what will happen is we're going to start to look at spending more time and budget on data transformation, on model development, and then on model management. And as a result, therefore, model ops becomes a critical environment for the IT organization. Now, some of us out there should be doubtful about this. We should be doubtful because, as I said, this isn't a market. This is, in essence, a combination of capabilities that impacts the entire IT platform and IT industry. And the question is, well, do we really think it will go that fast? And the other aspect of concern or hesitation from people may be that we, in many instances, have seen this hype of AI that then suddenly dies. This goes back all the way actually to the 70s, but certainly also 80s when you saw a particular boom. And we've had others as we've gone through the last 30 years. So the question is, what's different now? And the answer to that is, well, first, the technology is far more mature. The different elements that make up this are in place already, in the sense that the infrastructure aspects are there. And then something interesting in this phase is happening that hasn't happened in the other phases. And that is that the consumer, the employee, has suddenly become, the citizen has become involved in this. To the scale of, as you've all heard, the hundreds of millions of downloads of ChatGPT or usage of ChatGPT, is that this is now a consumer-based technology as well, which is driving this notion of shadow AI, meaning artificial intelligence adopted and used by individual employees in the organization, often without the knowledge or at least without the guidance from either the IT organization, from HR, or from the business leaders. As we all know, a substantial number of people are sitting now trying to create stuff that they historically would have created by themselves. And this is what leads to the question, is it going to be shadow AI, the deployment of this technology, that really drives the change? And I believe so. That has also led to organizations thinking about, should we ban the usage of this? Because obviously the employee could use personal information that would be against certain laws, for example, GDPR in Europe, or is the employee actually sending trade secrets or business secrets out through what they are using in information in the scripts and how they use the product? So it's highly likely that we will have this counter reaction, which is, let's forbid it. And for those of you that have been in the IT industry for many years, you know that strategy does not work. And so the question here is, how do we adopt artificial intelligence? How do we acknowledge that shadow AI is happening, not just as an employee-based activity, but also as a small organizational unit activity? And how do we make sure that these employees, the managers across the organization, are well armed and understand how to use this in an efficient manner? So that is the critical aspect of this. And that leads to a series of recommendations that I will leave you to be able to read as you go through this. But it is clear that each functional department needs to focus on that. We need to focus on how the IT organization actually scales this and the impact of its IT architecture. And we'll need to look at how we evolve and communicate our maturity levels about using artificial intelligence as we go forward. So let's shift to the last point, and we'll briefly go through that, because what do we do now? And the primary recommendation is that every functional leader needs to have a series of mission-critical initiatives, or will have a series of mission-critical initiatives, for which all of these initiatives will roll up, into how this integrates into the strategy of the organization. So we will need to look at how does AI impact the strategy. And this obviously, as you could see, is the CEO's responsibility. The CEO is the person that has to set the tone for how are we going to evolve this. That will be done in combination with the board. Also, to develop a vision for how we blend AI and human skills. We are rapidly sitting in a situation in which we have to think of ourselves not as an organization based on a combination of jobs, but an organization based on a combination of skills. And once we do that, we will start to recognize that some skills will be replaced by artificial intelligence. So our vision for our skills and competencies going forward has to be that blending of AI and human skills. We need to understand how it impacts our products and service and integration with the customer, and then develop awareness around artificial intelligence in the leadership team. As you can see, those are 4 mission-critical priorities for the CEO. They vary for other executives, of which there's only 5 mentioned here. So they're examples. They're not a complete list of objectives. But I would encourage everyone to really start to consider how do we incorporate this in our business planning and in our strategy planning going forward, and how do we then assign initiatives across the organization to ensure that we are not surprised by how fast some aspects of this might evolve over the next 2, 3 to 5 years. Whatever you do, and you will have heard this several times now, is you have to recognize that the ability to scale is about ensuring that every leader in the organization has the right capabilities, that your organization has the right capabilities. And what I'm showing you here is a model that we don't have any time to go into depth on, but it is a model that illustrates the new capabilities required within organizations to continue the transformation around digital, of which artificial intelligence plays such an important role. And it can be divided up into 4 groups: strategy, technology, organizational, and then leadership. Each of these have a number of different elements of which you can then rate leaders on how proficient they are in, for example, being a digital visionary. Can every manager in the organization express where they think their area of responsibility will move and evolve, and how they can impact this positively going forward? And so true also with all of the 12 other capabilities that are listed in this chart. Now, a small organization called DI2X actually goes out and uses this model to test the capabilities in organizations on a scale from 1 to 10. And this shows the data from the overall database. And as you can see, every capability is important for a digital transformation, but artificial intelligence and the emergence of it right now, the explosion of it right now, has an impact on how a leader talks about being a digital visionary, how the organization is digitally visionary. It has an impact on the view of the workplace and how the workplace changes. As I mentioned, it has an impact on competencies, because if competencies are not just human competencies, but AI-based competencies, all leaders need to understand, how do I manage that environment? How do I manage the environment that I have 20 people that report to me and then 20 AI-based environments that mimic the roles of what those people, what some of those people did, so that I'm essentially managing a combination of human and virtual capabilities to the tune of 40 FTEs. So each of these capabilities are important, and if there is one thing you kick off right now, that is to really understand which of these capabilities do you need to impact in order to be successful with your transformation using AI. Because if you don't have managers that are capable or aware of or are focusing on evolving their capabilities, you will run into the issue of not being able to scale because the projects will stall because simply lack of the right set of capabilities, and also how it will then ultimately impact the culture of the company in a negative manner because managers are not prepared to deal with the changes that are coming. So really focus on competencies as we move forward. So 3 things I would do: create an executive focus around artificial intelligence. So I had a set of examples of mission-critical initiatives for different functional leaders in the organization, including the CEO, and ultimately, therefore, could also have had one for the board. But ensure that these are in place, are linked, and are managed appropriately. Implement a strategic focus on evolving your corporate organizational skills and capabilities. Having a skills-oriented aspect, being a skills-focused organization as opposed to a job-focused organization, will make the transformation easier. And then truly ensure that every employee has an interest in or is encouraged in terms of developing artificial intelligence and their capabilities around that, and potentially and perhaps nominate 2024 as the year of AI for your organization as you evolve over the course of the next couple of years. With that, thank you very much. And we can obviously take questions if you so would like. If there are no more questions, I just want to thank everybody for participating today.